Freddy's dead. The final nightmare has Freddy killing kids at a psychiatric place, but they're gonna band together to defeat Freddy for the final time. This is bottom of the barrel for the Elm Street franchise. This is one of the worst horror movies ever made. This is one of the most infamous horror movies ever made. Because it was so far from the original movie. Dare I say, on to the positives, I guess. This movie, it at least has a somewhat focused story. It has a somewhat focused story than Elm Street 4 or 5. The story is easy-ish to follow. Like, Elm Street 4 has little to no story. Elm Street 5 had somewhat of a story, but it's still kind of weird. This one at least has some type of story, a story that you can actually kind of follow. It's the easiest following story for parts 4, 5, and this. So, yeah. One last positive I'll have to say for this. I'll give it this. The one goofy thing that Freddy does in this movie that I kind of liked was when he was playing Spencer like a video game, and then he said, boing, 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 boing! After so much boredom in this movie, that actually kind of got me to laugh. I have no idea why that made me laugh. It's like I knew that was coming up, and I knew that was silly, but for whatever reason, I just laughed at that. I don't know why, because it is so stupid, so silly, but for whatever reason, that kind of got me to laugh. Like, I've never laughed at that part ever, but I think now just knowing what movie I'm watching and, dare I say, trying to find some positive in it, I guess, that actually got me to laugh. So, good on that movie. Good on this movie, I guess. Now on to the negatives. It's all negatives. This is an extremely campy movie. There are no scares. It's all jokes. Freddy isn't scary. He's a Looney Tunes cartoon. There's nothing effectively scary. Not that it's trying to be scary. It's all goofy stuff. Freddy plays Spencer like a video game. That's where that one positive came from. Where he was bouncing around and he said, boing, 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 boing! Freddy rides a bus and says, no screaming while the bus is in motion! And almost every line that he says is almost like, it's not like it's a catchphrase, but it's like it's a one-liner. There we go. Jeez. It's almost like every line is supposed to be a one-liner from Freddy. Like, maybe not in the end, but for most of the runtime, over half the movie, it feels like every line he says, it's just a one-liner, and it is just so terrible. And, you know, I gotta say, this movie really isn't that creative in the Elm Street franchise either. From Elm Street 1, they also do this and this. In this movie, they pull Freddy into the real world. From 2, I don't know, I guess the rules don't make sense. I guess. Because, that's another negative. Freddy can control the house to change from a normal house to the Elm Street house in the real world when the group of kids goes there. So that's kind of like weird. And another thing is, where are the bodies? Because Freddy kills Carlos and his head explodes, and his body is just gone. Nobody ever sees his body again. When John Doe dies, his body disappears from the real world because he falls in the dream world, hits bed spikes or whatever. His body is in the real world, awake for some reason, and then his body disappears and like goes into Freddy. And it's like the bodies were still in the real world in for sure the first Elm Street movie, and actually also in I think the second and third Elm Street movie. So this doesn't make sense. So back to the other negative of this movie isn't creative. Just like in the third one, the main place is a psychiatric institute with teens having problems. Just like in Elm Street 4, there's a dream loop of when the kids in this film are in the van and they're driving and they're trying to find a way out of Springwood, and it just keeps looping back around. And just like 5, I don't know, terrible character traits. The characters in 5 were terrible. The characters in this are terrible. So there you go. The kills in this movie are terrible, goofy, not bloody. Freddy, like I said, kills Spencer by playing him like a video game. And even when he dies, even when Spencer dies, all that happens is he just falls down a hole. John Doe falls onto bed spikes. Like, I guess that was kind of gory, but it's like just too goofy. There's other kills, like one is Mr. Underwood, a character you barely even see. He gets killed off screen in a flashback. And one last thing, how would I compare this to some other movies? Like, let's say Thanksgiving 3. I think Thanksgiving 3 is worse. Even if it had some cool kills in it. Thanksgiving 3 was just way too random and not cohesive. Freddy's Dead at least made somewhat sense. Had somewhat of a story. I can, again, give it that. Compared to Seed of Chucky, I think Freddy is worse. Seed of Chucky still feels like Chucky, and it also has some pretty good kills in it. And then compare Freddy's Dead to Scooby-Doo Return to Zombie Island. Zombie Island is worse, because it breaks continuity from the original, and I guess that's another thing I can say about Freddy's Dead. Again, it doesn't break continuity from the other previous films, at least story-wise, and everything in the franchise still happened. So this would technically be better than Scooby-Doo Return to Zombie Island. At least for this, there were 2 measly positives. Scooby-Doo Return to Zombie Island had absolutely nothing. So, in the end of this review, this movie absolutely sucks. It has very little I have very little positive to say about it. It's one of the worst horror movies ever made. It would have to be in the top 5 worst or of my least favorite horror movies I've seen. I think Thanksgiving 3 is a little bit worse, but this, dare I say, would probably be at number 2. So this is one of the worst horror movies ever made. So that's my review on Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. Thanks for watching.